Hey. Thank you for the like. I appreciate it. Hey, Zay. Hey, Zay. Nice to see you, Zay. Hey, Arnold. Thank you for coming through. Hello, Chris. Thank you, guys. So, this is a recap of why the kingdoms were divided. As I said, I'm just doing these little recaps before I get into the major prophets and minor prophets, because they do refer back to some of the things that we're speaking. And as you know, we're in the wisdom books right now, and you know, we've read a lot in the history books, and a lot of what we're doing right now in the wisdom books is trying to apply what we're learning to our life. So it's good to just go back and refresh what we read in the history books, and in the law books as well, and just, you know, trying to get ourselves familiar with some of the events and names, because God will refer to these events and some of these names in as we get further along in the Bible. So it's just a good refresher to, you know, remember what is going on, so you know, you guys are not lost when we are reading. And also, you know, if I'm saying things like Ephraim or the northern kingdom or southern, you can understand one, what I'm saying, on why and how it came to that, so yes, we will be doing a recap on how the divisions of the kingdoms came about and why. So if you remember in the last recap I did of Shiloh, remember that they were all under one monarch, so they were all united. At this point, they had not separated their kingdoms. They were all one kingdom. They had their allotted places that was given to them by Joshua when they went into the promised land, right? So they were under, hey Frankie Frog, thank you for coming through. So they were under King Saul, they were under King David, and then they were under King Solomon until King Solomon died, right? So we're just going to read why in the first place the kingdom divided, right? And then we'll just go into what kingdoms kind of sided with Ephraim, and the whole reason behind the splitting kingdoms, right? So we're going to be in First Kings, and we're going to read some of chapter 11, which is Solomon's wives, and then we're going to go into chapter 12 in First Kings, where the division will take place. So if you remember in Kings it was First Kings, it was King David, and then we come into Solomon, right? And then 2 Kings, we start to see the kings of Israel and Judah, right? But then remember in Chronicles 2, at the end, coming to the end, we start to see just the kings of Judah, right? Which next week I'll do a recap on just the kings of Judah. But it's also good to know the fall of the Northern Kingdom, which I'll do a recap on after the division, right? Just to so you can understand, why the Northern Kingdom gets referred back to. So this is First Kings, chapter 11. Now it says Solomon's wives. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter. Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonites, and Hittites. They were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, "You must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods." Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. You should go live, stream that so it can automatically go live on all platforms. I don't know if I'm ready to go on all platforms yet. But I'll think into that. Hi. Right, so if we go to Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy 17. Right. If you go to Deuteronomy chapter 17, right, verse 1. It says here, worshipping other gods. Do not, well, okay, this is like sort of the end of 16, but starts at the top of 17. Do not set up any wooden Asherah poles besides the altar you build to the Lord your God, and do not erect a sacred stone for these the Lord your God hates. Right? So God has already told them not to set up any Asherah poles or build up anything that is not of God, right? And we've seen that the Israelites have been doing the opposite with their high places and with their Asherah poles, right? So God had already warned them. This is in Deuteronomy, so we're at the very beginning of the book, right? So God has already warned them, right? So if you go to in Deuteronomy, it says the king, right? When you enter the land your God is giving you and have taken possession of it and settled in it, and you say, "Let us set a king over us like all nations around us." Be sure to appoint over you a king the Lord your God chooses. He must be from among your fellow Israelites. Do not place a foreigner over you, one who is not an Israelite. The king, moreover, must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself, or make the people return to Egypt to get more of them. For the Lord has told you, you are not to go back that way again. He must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. He must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. Right? Everything that God has said not to do, Solomon did the opposite and broke every one of those rules, right? When he takes the throne of his kingdom, he is to write for himself on a scroll a copy of this law taken from that of the Levitical priest. Right? So Solomon really didn't have no excuse, right? He didn't really have no excuse not to follow, because it says here that they should have taken a copy of the law, right? And it should have been with him. It is to be with him, and he is to read it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to revere the Lord his God and follow carefully all the words of his law and these decrees, and not consider himself better than his fellow Israelites and turn from the law to the right or to the left. Then he and his descendants will reign a long time over his kingdom in Israel. Right? So God had already said don't do these things, right? As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. He followed Asheroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. Right? So Solomon did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not follow the Lord completely as David his father had done. On a hill east of Jerusalem, Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable god of Moab, and for Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. He did the same for all his foreign wives, who burned incense and offered sacrifices to their gods. Right? So they're in idolatry. They're in idolatry. God sees it. And he's like, Solomon, you're in idolatry. The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Although he had forbidden Solomon to follow other gods, Solomon did not keep the Lord's command. So the Lord said to Solomon, since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David, your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe, for the sake of David my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. Right? So God, it said, Solomon, I'm so angry with you and your choices, your idolatry, that, now that the kingdoms, I'm going to split the kingdom apart. It's going to be split apart. That's where the divide comes, because of King Solomon, right? The divide comes because of King Solomon. But because of how faithful King David was, Judah was saved, right? So Judah was saved for David. So basically the whole reason why the kingdom is divided is because of Solomon, right? Because he couldn't keep to not having many wives for himself, or acquire much silver, or have horses or chariots. So it's his fault the kingdom split. Yes, the division was because of Solomon's idolatry, right? God warned him to not intermarry and keep him as the only living God. But as well as Solomon, as well as having God, right, he believed in other gods, and he was enabling the other tribes to have high places and do detestable things, which God never commanded, or no, God never said to do that, right? So so God said, okay, well, this is what's going to happen. This is your punishment. This is your punishment. King Solomon, you could not listen, so I'm going to divide the kingdoms now. You was once united, and now you're not going to be united. So, if we move on to chapter 12, it says Israel rebels against Rehoboam. So, I'll just explain quickly. Jeroboam is Solomon's high-ranking official, right? So he was helping Solomon, right, before he died. Rehoboam is Solomon's son. So you remember God said, I'm not going to tear the kingdom away in your lifetime, but when it's your son's. Right? So now we're going to move on to Rehoboam, who was playing both sides. He was playing both sides, it sounds like. Yeah, he was. He was, and God warned him not to do that. God warned him not to do that, and he still did it. So this is Israel rebels against Rehoboam. Remember, Rehoboam is Solomon's son. Rehoboam went to Shechem, right? For all Israel had gone there to make him king. When Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard this, so Jeroboam was Solomon's high-ranking advisor, heard this, he was still in Egypt where he had fled from King Solomon. So at this point, King Solomon's dead. King Solomon is not alive, and Rehoboam is now going to claim the throne as king. He returned from Egypt, so they sent for Jeroboam, and he and the whole assembly of Israel went to Rehoboam and said to him, "Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you." So Jeroboam is going to Rehoboam and saying, well, Solomon put such a heavy burden on us. Can you lighten the load? Can you just give us a breather, right? Rehoboam answered, "Go away for 3 days and then come back to me." So the people went away. Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father Solomon during his lifetime. "How would you advise me to answer these people?" he asked. They replied, "If today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servant." But Rehoboam rejected the advice the elders gave him and consulted the young man who grew up with him and were serving him. So if Rehoboam had listened to the elders, right, Jeroboam would not have done what he had done, right? So, Rehoboam decided to not take the advice of the elders and actually took the advice of his friends. He asked them, "What is your advice? How should we answer these people who say to me, 'Lighten the yoke your father put on us'?" The young man who had grown up with him replied, "These people have said to you, 'Your father has put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter.' Now tell them, 'My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke, and I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips, I will scourge you with scorpions." 3 days later, Jeroboam and the people returned to Rehoboam. As the king had said, "Come back to me in 3 days." So Jeroboam and the people returned. So Jeroboam and the rest of the tribes, right, have come back to Rehoboam. The king answered the people harshly, rejecting the advice given them by the elders. He followed the advice of the young men and said, "My father made your yoke heavy, I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips, I will scourge you with scorpions." So the king did not listen to the people, for this turn of offense was from the Lord, to fulfill the word the Lord had spoken to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, through Ahijah the Shilonite. When all Israel saw that the king refused to listen to them, they answered the king, "What share do we have in David? What part in Jesse's son? To your tents, Israel. Look after your own house, David." So the Israelites went home, but as for the Israelites who were living in the towns of Judah, Rehoboam still ruled over them. King Rehoboam sent out Adoniram, he was in charge of forced labor, but all Israel stoned him to death. King Rehoboam, however, managed to get into his chariot and escape to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in a rebellion against the house of David to this day. So Israel's the northern kingdom, Samaria, the northern kingdom, right? The northern kingdom. And this is they rebelled because Rehoboam would not make their lives a little bit easier. Instead, he made it a lot harder, right? It became very political. And so Jeroboam said, do you know what? I'm going to go and make my own country. I'm going to make my own city, right? I'm going to make my own city. And guess what? I'm going to rule over there and I'm going to do what I want, right? I'm not listening to you no more. I've been ruling under your father Solomon, right? I've come to you to ask, to reverse what your father has done. And you said, no, you're going to make it harder. So now I'm not even going to listen to you, right? I've listened to your father Solomon for far too long now. I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to go and do my own thing. So Jeroboam was the first king in the northern kingdom, so Samaria, right? So Jeroboam is the reason why there is a city there, right? Even though God said it had to be done and fulfilled that the kingdoms had to be split, but Jeroboam was like the ruler, right? He was the first ruler. Hey Jalen, thank you for coming through, right? So King where are we? When all the Israelites heard that Jeroboam returned, they sent and called him to the assembly and made him king over Israel. Only the tribe of Judah remained loyal to the house of David, right? So, can you imagine? All the other tribes went and sided with Jeroboam, right? Out of rebellion, out of jealousy, out of envy, for whatever reason. And only the tribe of Judah remained loyal to David, right? When Rehoboam arrived in Jerusalem, he mustered all Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, 180,000 able young men, to go to war against Israel and to regain the kingdom for Rehoboam, son of Solomon. But this word of God came to Shemaiah, the man of God. Say to Rehoboam, son of Solomon, king of Judah, to all Judah and Benjamin, and to the rest of the people, this is what the Lord says. Do not go up to fight against your brothers, the Israelites. Go home, every one of you, for this is my doing. Right? So God told them, do not go and fight against Rehoboam, because I had already said that this needs to be fulfilled. So you go home. You're not going to overrule what I have put in place, right? And God said, when he makes a promise, he makes a promise, right? He doesn't go back on his word, right? So they obeyed the word of the Lord and went home again as the Lord had ordered. So this is talking about the golden calves at Bethel and Dan. So this is where the Israelites, they've gone into rebellion for one, and now they're going into idolatry, right? They're going into idolatry. So Jeroboam was the start of the northern kingdom's downfall, right? Then Jeroboam fortified Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and lived there. From there he went out and built up Peniel. Jeroboam thought to himself, the kingdom is now likely to revert to the house of David. If these people go up to their offer sacrifices at the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem, they again gave their alliance to the Lord. Rehoboam, king of Judah, they will kill me and return to the king Rehoboam. After seeking advice, the king made up 2 golden calves, right? So this is why he made the golden calves, because he didn't want the people to go back to Jerusalem and go back into the temple and worship God and probably go and side back with the house of David, right? He did it out of fear, right? And also it's quite evil that he did that, right? Stopping the people from actually going worshipping the true living God, right? So he said, you know what, I want the power, I want the status, I want everything, so I'm going to make up something that they can worship instead of them going down to Jerusalem. They will kill me and return to King Rehoboam. After seeking advice, the king made 2 golden calves. He said to the people, this is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. Right? So he is telling the rest of the tribes, this is the God, fake God, right? Because this is lowercase g. who brought you out of Egypt. He's speaking false against God. He's speaking false lies against God. One he sent up in Bethel and the other in Dan. And remember this, and remember the tribe of Dan, because when we get further along into when we get into Revelations, it won't make sense. But remember the tribe of Dan and what they did. And this thing became a sin. The people came to worship the one at Bethel and went as far as Dan to worship the other. Jeroboam built shrines on high places and appointed priests from all sorts of people, even though they were not Levites. He instituted a festival on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the festival held in Judah, and offered sacrifices on the altar. This he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves he had made, and at Bethel he also installed priests at the high places he had made. On the 15th day of the 8th month, a month of his own choosing, he offered sacrifices on the altar he had built at Bethel. So he instituted the festivals for the Israelites and went up to the altar to make offerings. Right? So that is why the kingdoms were divided, right? That's why they were no longer. And if you remember me saying in my recap last time that Ephraim was the face of the northern kingdom, right? Ephraim was the face of the northern kingdom. So again, we just need to go back to understand. Yeah, to understand this, we just need to go back to so we're in Genesis 48 to 49, right? So if you remember, Ephraim and Manasseh were Joseph's sons, right? Ephraim and Manasseh were Joseph's sons. So it says here, Genesis 48. Sometime later, Joseph was told, "Your father is ill." So he took his sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, along with him. When Jacob was told, "Your sons has come to you," Israel rallied his strength and sat up on his bed. Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and there he blessed me and said to me, I'm going to make you fruitful and increase your numbers. I will make you a community of peoples, and I will give this land an everlasting possession to your descendants after you. Now then, your two sons born to you in Egypt before I came to you here will be reckoned as mine. Ephraim and Manasseh will be mine, just as Reuben and Simeon are mine. Any children born to you after them will be yours in the territory they inherit. They will be reckoned under the names of their brothers. As I return from Padan, to my sorrow, Rachel died in the land of Canaan, while we were still on the way, a little distance from Ephrath. So I buried her there beside the road to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. When Israel saw the sons of Joseph, he asked, "Who are these?" "These are the sons God has given me here," Joseph said to his father. Then Israel said, "Bring to me so that I may bless them." Now Israel's eyes were failing because of old age, and he could hardly see. So Joseph brought his son close to him, and his father kissed him and embraced him. Israel said to Joseph, "I never expected to see your face again, and now God has allowed me to see your children too." So Joseph removed from Israel's knee and bowed down with his face to the ground, and Joseph took both of them, Ephraim on his right towards Israel's left hand, and Manasseh on his left towards Israel's right hand, and brought them close. But Israel reached out his hand and put it on Ephraim's head, though he was the younger, and crossing his arms, he put his left hand on Manasseh's head, even though Manasseh was the firstborn. Then he blessed Joseph and said, "May the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked faithfully, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who had delivered me all harm, may he bless these boys. May they be called by my name and the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they increase greatly on the earth." When Joseph saw his father placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, he was displeased. So he took hold of his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Joseph said to him, "No, my father, this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son. I know he too will become a people, and he too will become great. Nevertheless, his younger brother will be greater than he, and his descendants will become a group of nations." He blessed them that day and said, "In your name will Israel pronounce this blessing. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh." So he put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, "I am about to die, but God will be with you and take you back to the land of your fathers. And to you I give one more ridge of the land. Then to your brother the ridge I took from the Amalekites with my sword and my bow." Right? And then chapter 49, it just talks about Jacob blessing his sons, right? But Reuben, if you remember, Reuben doesn't get his birthright. His birthright went to Joseph, right? Reuben doesn't get his birthright as the firstborn because he slept with his father's concubine, right? And that was disgraceful and shameful. So Reuben no longer got his birthright. That went down to Joseph, right? Which then fell to his children, which was Ephraim and Manasseh. So that's why, that's why Ephraim and Manasseh are blessed, right? But even though Ephraim was the younger, God had already set it for Ephraim to be the face of many nations, right? So that's what's happened. Ephraim became the face of the northern kingdom, right? Hey Rome, thank you for coming through. And it's quite a contrast because Ephraim walked righteously, right? But then we see the tribe, like the descendants, become rebellious, prideful, and unfaithful, right? So the tribes that sided with Ephraim were the tribes that sided with Ephraim were Asher, Naphtali, Zebulun, and Issachar. From the Transjordan tribes east of the Jordan River was Gad, Manasseh half-tribe, Eastern, and Reuben, right? Central tribes was Manasseh, the half-tribe, Western half, Dan, but Dan was originally meant to have his allotted. Hey Sai, thank you for coming through. Dan was originally in the south, right? But because they could not conquer their territory and they were kicked out of their own territory, they set up their place in the far north side, right? In the northern side. So, they ended up joining Ephraim. So, yeah, Manasseh, the half-tribe Manasseh, western half, and Dan. And then Judah and Benjamin stayed loyal to the house of David. Remember, Benjamin was in the middle of Ephraim and Judah. But Benjamin was sort of more closer to Judah. So they decided to side with Judah, right? There was also Simeon. There was also Simeon as well, who was in the south. But he lost his identity, right? He lost his identity. So again, let's go to 34. Right, so in Genesis 34, I'm not going to read all of it, right? But if you remember, their sister was, violated by the men of Shechem, right? And then if you remember, Simeon and Levi took revenge and basically killed all the men in Shechem, right? Because of what they did to their sister. So that's why they don't, that's why they didn't really, that's why Jacob cursed them basically, right? Jacob basically cursed them. And if we go to Simeon, so it says here, Simeon and Levi's, this is Genesis 49, chapter 49, verses 5 to 6. Simeon and Levi are brothers, their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council, let me not join their assembly, for they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as pleased. Blessed be their anger so fierce and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. Right? So Jacob had put a curse on them. So Simeon lost their identity in Judah. Right? They kind of got like swallowed up, and Judah overtook them. So you don't really hear Simeon, the tribe of Simeon, because it was already said from Genesis. You know, Jacob had cursed them and already said that you're going to lose your identity. There is going to be no Simeon, right? Same with Levi. But God redeemed them. God redeemed them and made them Levites, right? So he, even though, you know, they did wrong, Levi and Simeon, God still chose to use Levi for the Levites as the priests, right? So they didn't get lots like the rest of the tribes. They got God, right? They were serving God, so they were dedicated to God. That was their portion, right? And the rest of the Israelites were, you know, doing what they do, and they would, you know, help the Levites in terms of like food and stuff like that. So we see that most of the tribes follow the northern kingdom, and then we see Judah and Benjamin only staying loyal to David. Levi was consecrated to God. So that's the reason why Simeon is not mentioned, right? So as I said, Ephraim became the face of the northern tribe. He inherited Reuben's birthright. It says it in 1 Chronicles 5:1-2, and then again Genesis 48:49, if you want to go read that. The name, this the meaning behind Ephraim and Manasseh. So Ephraim means twice fruitful. So, you know, Joseph named him Ephraim because God had made him highly fruitful in the time of his suffering, the time that he was suffering in Egypt, right? And out of all, and God made Joseph like fruitful, and he gave him this and he gave him that, and he named Manasseh, making to forget, because God helped him forget his troubles and what he was going through, right? So those are the reasons why the tribes had been broken off, right? It initially started with King Solomon not being obedient to what God had said to do, right? And then it got even worse because Jeroboam didn't want to listen to Rehoboam, and he wanted to make his own kingdom, and he set up his own idols and stopped the rest of the Israelites from going into Judah. And he said, hey, this is your God, and this is what you're going to do, and this is the God that brought you out, not that God in Jerusalem. This is the God that brought you out, and you're going to bow down to this God, and you're going to praise this God, right? So Jeroboam is the reason for the rest of the Israelites idolatry and sin, right? And as we get into the major prophets, they will start to refer back to these events, right? They will start to refer back to these events to show how detestable and how much evil they did, but yet God was still merciful. God was still patient with them. God sent them many warnings to turn and repent from their ways, and they still didn't listen. So when the major prophets came and prophesied what was going to happen, and God was like, I'm not going to turn away from this. I said what I said and it's done. You will understand why now, right? Also, you will understand now why the two kingdoms are split, and why Ephraim is the face of the northern kingdom, right? So when they refer back to Ephraim, they're referring back to also the tribes that sided with Ephraim, right? And when they refer to the southern kingdom, it's Judah and it's Benjamin. So I hope that has helped the recap. I hope it's like cleared some stuff up a little bit. You understanding more of the tribes, you understanding why some were put ahead of other tribes, on why some tribes why some tribes are a bit more known than other tribes, right? So that when we start to move on through the major prophets, as I said, it will just start to make sense. I might just, so you can just get understanding of the fall of the northern kingdom. If we're going to Kings, 2 Kings, chapter 17. So this is Israel exiled because of sin. So this is the northern kingdom, right? So this is 2 Kings chapter 17, and we're reading from verse 7. All this took place because the Israelites had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them out of Egypt, from under the powers of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. They worshipped their gods and followed the practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before them, as well as the practices that the king of Israel had introduced. The Israelites secretly did things against the Lord their God that were not right, from watching tower to fortified city. They built themselves high places in all their towns. They set up sacred stones and Asherah poles on every high place and under every spreading tree. At every high place they burned incense at the nations whom the Lord had driven out before them had done. They did wicked things that aroused the Lord's anger. They worshipped idols, though the Lord had said, "You shall not do this." The Lord warned Israel and Judah, though all his prophets and seers turned from your evil ways. Observe my commands and decrees in accordance with the entire law that I command your ancestors to obey, and that I delivered to you through my servants the prophets. But they would not listen and were as stiff-necked as their ancestors, who did not trust in the Lord their God. They rejected his decrees and the covenant he had made with their ancestors, and the statutes he had warned them to keep. They followed worthless idols and themselves became worthless. They imitated the nations around them, although the Lord had ordered them, "Do not do as they do." They forsook all the commandments of the Lord their God and made for themselves 2 idol casts in the shape of calves and the Asherah poles. They bowed down to all the starry hosts, and they worshipped Baal. They sacrificed their sons and daughters in the fire. They practiced divination and sought omens and sold themselves to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, arousing his anger. So the Lord was very angry with Israel and removed them from his presence. Only the tribe of Judah was left, and even Judah did not keep the commands of the Lord their God. They followed the practices Israel had introduced. Therefore the Lord rejected all the people of Israel. He afflicted them and gave them into the hand of plunderers until he thrust them from his presence. When he tore Israel away from the house of David, they made Jeroboam son of Nebat their king. Jeroboam enticed Israel away from following the God and caused them to commit a great sin. The Israelites persisted in all the sins of Jeroboam and did not turn away from them until the Lord removed them from his presence, as he had warned through all his servants, the prophets. So the people of Israel were taken from their homeland into exile in Assyria, and they are still there. Right? So Judah saw what happened to the northern kingdom. He saw what happened to them. He saw that they got the Assyria took them away and exiled them, right? And they still decided to do evil and carry on their wicked ways and pay no mind to what God did to the northern kingdom, right? The northern kingdom was destroyed and it, never to return, right? Never to return. So I hope that, gives a little bit of background on the fall of the northern kingdom, why there was division in the first place, how the Israelites and the northern kingdom got into sin, and, why Ephraim was the face of the northern kingdom. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all that came out. Thank you all for the likes. I really, really appreciate it. I will be back tomorrow to do the next chapters of Proverbs. I think I'll be back next week. I will do a recap on just the kings of Judah. And I think I don't have anything else that I'm going to go over in terms of recap unless someone says they want something to go over, right? But that should really cover when we go into, sort of the major prophets and they're referring to some of the events, that it should be a little bit easier to understand. So I'll see you tomorrow if you can make it. If not, I'll see you when you can make it live. Again, thank you for all that came out, and I'll see you.